The leaders of the G7 wealthy nations are meeting face-to-face for the first time since the pandemic began and expected to announce the availability of 1 billion doses of COVID-19 vaccines. They are already facing criticism that is too little and too late. We've also heard in the last few minutes from the host, the UK's Prime Minister Boris Johnson, that he sees a huge opportunity here for the world's leading democracies to think about tackling inequality as they all try to build back their economies in the wake of the global pandemic. He said there's a risk that inequalities could be entrenched. What we need is to level up. Let's go to my colleague, Ben Brown.
Yeah, hello and welcome from the beautiful Cornish coastline here. It's brightening up a little. I'm at Tregenna Castle, which is where Boris Johnson, the UK Prime Minister, has just opened the G7 summit. Well, Mr Johnson said the leaders of the G7 would learn the lessons from what he called the wretched pandemic, and said that world leaders need to make sure they don't repeat some of the errors that they doubtless have made in the course of the last 18 months or so.
It is genuinely wonderful to see everybody in person. I can't tell you what a difference it makes. We've all been going through the most wretched pandemic our countries have faced for our lifetimes, maybe longer, much longer. And I actually think this is a meeting that genuinely needs to happen, because we need to make sure that we learn the lessons from the pandemic. We need to make sure that we don't repeat some of the errors that we doubtless made in the course of the last 18 months or so. And we need to make sure that we now allow our economies to recover. And I think that they have the potential to bounce back very strongly. And there's all sorts of reasons for being optimistic, but it is vital that we don't repeat the mistake of the last great crisis, the last great economic recession in 2008, when the recovery was not uniform across all parts of society. And I think what's gone wrong with this pandemic, or what risks being a lasting scar, is that I think that inequalities may be entrenched. And we need to make sure that as we recover, we level up across our societies and we build back better. And I actually think that we have a huge opportunity to do that, because as G7, we are united in our vision for a cleaner, greener world, a solution to the problems of climate change. And in those ideas, in those technologies, in which we're all addressing together, I think there is the potential to generate many, many millions of high-wage, high-skill jobs. And I think that is what the people of our countries now want us to focus on. They want us to be sure that we're beating the pandemic together and discussing how we'll never have a repeat of what we've seen, but also that we're building back better together.
Well, that was Boris Johnson speaking just a few minutes ago to welcome all the other leaders here for this G7 summit, which is now underway. He was saying it's a meeting that needs to happen. I mean, many observers saying it's actually one of the most important G7 summits in history, because it's not just about trying to vaccinate the world, trying to rescue the world from the pandemic. It's also focusing on the post-pandemic economic recovery and indeed fighting climate change. It's a really huge agenda that these leaders have over the next 3 days. Well, our diplomatic correspondent, James Landale, looks a little more now at what we can expect from this G7 summit.
All summits begin with ceremony, the pageantry that underpins the politics, and the G7 is no exception. But for the world leaders arriving in Cornwall, they know this gathering is about policy as much as presentation, and for once, they could make a difference.
We're focusing here on a huge range of things that the G7 wants to look at, and so we're looking at the post-pandemic world. We're looking at what we can do to make sure that we don't have the world caught unprepared again or the Western world anyway, for a pandemic in the way that we were.
Above all, this is a chance for G7 countries to make the case for democracy. These leaders want to show that after the divisions of past years, they can cooperate to address the problems of the world and the needs of their voters, as well as tackling the shared security challenges from countries like Russia and China.
I think standing up for the international order, being clear about the rules that apply, being clear about the values that apply, and being clear to both Russia and China as leading members of the international community, they must live up to their responsibilities. That's a pretty important message to come out of this G7.
The G7 is also an opportunity for real action on climate change. Campaigners here are hoping the only hot air will be in their inflatable caricatures. For this meeting is a milestone towards the big COP26 climate summit in the autumn, and new pledges to cut carbon emissions are expected. But will enough cash be promised to help poorer countries adapt to climate change?
It's a very special moment in history where we have to get investment of the right kind back going again to drive the recovery and the transformation that we need of our economies for climate change. It's almost like Bretton Woods after the Second World War. If you put G7 and G20 together, that's where we are. It's crucially important that we get strong decisions in these next few days.
And then there's the task of repairing the world economy when the pandemic recedes. The G7 leaders are not just promising more vaccines to poorer countries, they're also discussing how to recover from the global downturn and make the world economy more resilient against future threats. Diplomats here say that after the divisions of Trump and COVID, this summit is a chance for the world's democracies to show that multilateral cooperation can pay dividends. Officials talk of getting the gang back together again, but they know that what matters is not the reunion, but the results. James Landell, BBC News in Cornwall.
Well, those leaders are talking right now here, and they are expected to agree to donate at least 1 billion doses of vaccines to poorer countries in the next year. Now, aid groups have welcomed those promises, but they also point out that many of the doses won't actually arrive until next year. They say more needs to be done right now to help inoculate people around the world who are at risk. Sean Dilley reports.
Britain's vaccination rollout has been one of the success stories of a pandemic that has taken so much from so many. By the end of July, the government says it expects all UK adults will have been offered the first jab, and by the end of September, the UK will send its first 5 million doses to poorer countries.
The UK is really stepping up to the plate, but so is everybody here at the G7. There's no point in us just vaccinating the UK. We need to vaccinate the world.
It's a contribution that follows US President Joe Biden's pledge to donate 500 million no-strings Pfizer doses to 92 low and middle-income countries in the African Union. The two leaders hope other countries attending the G7 summit in Cornwall will also chip in to give a total of 1 billion vaccines. For some, though, progress is not fast enough.
So there's a staggering level of vaccine inequality around the world. This is illustrated by the fact that Cornwall has administered more vaccine doses than 22 African countries combined. This is a disaster waiting to happen, so the donation of vaccines is good, but nowhere near enough.
Others welcome any contribution, but a Herculean effort is needed to be effective. The World Health Organization says that less than 1% of Afghanistan's population has been vaccinated. In South Sudan, just 10,000 of the country's 11 million people have had their first dose. And the WHO says that under 2% of the hundreds of millions of vaccine doses administered globally have been in Africa. Today's pledge is not the UK's first contribution. It's previously donated around £500 million to a scheme called COVAX, which distributes jabs to the world's poorest countries. The UK has also helped develop the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine, which has been made available globally at cost price. The promise to deliver 100 million doses, though, sends an important political message at a time when the government has been widely criticised for cutting the international aid budget.
We're not going to be free of this virus. We're not going to be safe from this virus until the world is actually really suppressed. And if we can therefore get everybody safe globally, it's going to make us much safer as well. So I completely applaud the initiative of 100 million from the UK.
The Vaccines Minister Nadeem Zahawi concedes that even if wealthy G7 countries collectively agree to distribute 1 billion doses globally, there still won't be enough jabs for everyone. But the Prime Minister says the effort is an important step to vaccinate the world, and no one in the UK will miss out as a result. Sean Dilley, BBC News.